I'm going to prep this to put the motor back down in it. Make sure that the torque converter isn't sticking out more than 3 millimeters. That's a 3 millimeter Allen wrench. 2.9 millimeters, be about 110 thousandths or so. This Allen wrench is sticking out past the torque converter, so it's back in there where it needs to be. I'm going to clean those torque converter holes out. Put some new Loctite in them. And give your subframe a little cleaning. All the crud built up from the last motor leaking oil real bad, and I cleaned the flange off for the exhaust to mount a new gasket on it. Check and make sure that your dowel pins are in place, that there's 2 of them, one on each side. One's in the transmission and one was missing on the other motor. Unfortunately, the used replacement engine came with a dowel pin in on this side, so that's going to work out well. Hopefully it didn't do any long-term damage to the alignment of the torque converter bushing. Didn't get gouged or something from the transmission being off center a little bit. Always check your dowel pins and make sure you got both of them. I'll put a little dab of lubrication on the end of that, some grease. That nipple there, clean it off. Subframe's pretty clean, especially where the engine mounts are going to sit. I'm going to change the driver's side engine mount. Those bolts torque to 26 foot-pounds. The rubber's kind of broke off of it. They're 14 millimeters. I'm going to install new exhaust manifold gaskets on the head studs. I'm putting exhaust on this thing so I don't have to wall around under there, tightening these stupid studs down in the mess. It should stay up on there, get it down. Might be just a little bit of fight hooking it back up to the exhaust pipe. Or there's 3 studs down here on the bottom. But that's alright. Got the motor something relatively square and tilted back just a little bit. And just come along a little bit of pull on a dampener to tilt the motor. I've put a jack underneath the transmission and raised it up a couple of inches. Both of these studs are centered with the outer edge of the torque converter. I'll slip a new gasket on this exhaust flange. With any luck, it'll stay. I've got the torque converter turned so that one of the torque converter bolts will be ready to go into this access hole behind the flywheel. And I'm keeping it out of the condenser. And as the engine puller goes down, it's going to go over that away a little bit because the engine puller is going to straighten out. But make sure the oxygen sensor wires, if you're doing it this way, aren't anywhere where they're going to get busted. And if we're still in it. And watch the fuel lines over there. It's pretty much falling into place. Just make sure your opening stays square all across all the time. I'm having trouble with this dowel pin not going in just right. That's where this jiggles will come along. I've got on the dampener just a little bit and help it along. And go down there on the bottom and start threading that bottom nut in. Just keep the gap equal all the way around it. Make sure your torque converter is back to 3 millimeters. It's supposed to be sticking out or less. You don't want to damage that. Make sure the crank is pretty easy to move. It ain't gonna move very much with the got a come along on it, but as long as it's not locked up or something. I'll move it down on the bottom and turn that bottom nut a little bit. Just don't load it down to anything too hard and just jiggle it. It'll walk together here in a second. Watch this exhaust pipe flange over here. Now that the transmission case is together, I'm going to reach back in there and feel the torque converter is free to move. Nothing got bound up. If tightening these, I put 4 bolts, one on the very bottom, one on the very top, and one of the starter bolts, and a nut on the bottom on that side. If they get hard, I always check and make sure that the torque converter moves. And it's loose in there now, so it's good. Now it's just a matter of settling the engine mounts, the studs into their slots, and taking a screwdriver and putting this exhaust flange back onto those studs with a new gasket installed, and all that's cleaned up. Should be getting in business. Once the transmission and bell housing have 4 bolts in it, go ahead and let your transmission support jack or whatever brace down, and then start letting the motor down into the engine mounts slots on the frame. Be sure to take your transmission support out from underneath there before you let the motor down, or you'll be defeating your progress. Got the motor set down, finished putting the bolts in the bell housing. They torqued to 40 foot-pounds, and the engine mounts setting on the frame, the nuts torqued to 55 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and stick the torque converter bolts in through their access hole, and they torque to 20 foot-pounds. I'm going to be putting some Loctite on them, blue Loctite. If the intake's still on it, finding the torque converter bolt hole might be a little awkward. I took a small pair of vice grips and stuck it on a 10mm bolt, a long one, so it couldn't fall down in there, and got the crank flywheel bolt hole off to one side, and then reached in the access hole in the flywheel and spun the torque converter with my fingertip until the bolt dropped in. So it should be in business. And that should be a bolt hole. Next, I stuffed a shop towel and stuffed it in the hole in the flywheel directly under the bolt, so I can fish this torque converter bolt down in there without risk losing it down in the flywheel housing. Put some blue Loctite on it. Like that. I'll run each bolt down about 2/3 of the way and rotate the crankshaft, and then finish a final pass to 20 foot-pounds. If you have an inspection cover, stick it back on. I'm going to go ahead and mount the 4 throttle body 10mm bolts and the plug-ins for the map sensor and the throttle body. Drive-by wire box. Look around in your intake for any obstructions or pieces in there. Have the throttle body put back on, plug-ins to it, and a map sensor. Went ahead and put the engine stabilizer bar back on. Just tighten down the 38 foot-pounds. Got the ground cable back on the bracket for it. I put the heater hoses back on. The one with the curve in it goes on the bottom. The fuel line, the PCV valve hose leave off till the air conditioner goes back down. Plug oxygen sensors in anytime. Main engine wire harness. Have a look underneath, make sure your underneath work's done. The exhaust flange is bolted up. The engine mounts are tightened down to 55 foot-pounds, and the dowel pin guides are in the slot as well. You don't want those dowel pins up on the flat area. They gotta lay in a slot on both sides. Now, other than the oil filter, that's about it down here. Went ahead and installed the power steering pump. It has 2 bolts in the front. One's longer than the rest of them, and one in the back. And a pressure sensor plug-in for kicking the idle up whenever you cut the steering wheel and it gets under pressure. I'm waiting on a new radiator to arrive. I preferred to put the radiator and fans in before the accessories. I'm going to leave the air conditioner off so I can get that stuff down in there and do the hoses and stuff on that side. Keep the dirt out of your tranny lines. I can probably go ahead and lay the air cleaner in there. It's a mess. And then plug this sensor into that. Went ahead and mounted the driver's side engine ground to the head with a 10mm bolt. And I went ahead and changed the oil filter and drained any remaining oil out of the oil pan. It didn't look bad and looked reasonably fresh. That oil filter is smaller than the one on a motorcycle or lawnmower. and I put 4 quarts in it, and I put it just a little bit over full, plus I filled the filter up before I stuck it on there, and it's really up in behind the exhaust, up in a hole. Still waiting on the radiator. Went ahead and stuck a new O-ring on the air conditioner high pressure line. There's no damage to the condenser. The air cleaner is back into place. Mass airflow sensor wires and the valve cover vents are hooked up on the bottom. The throttle body clamp and 2 10mm holding on the support stands. And put the other piece in when the radiator gets installed and the fans are put on. And still the underneath splash shield, some belts. Now the new radiator is installed. Such as it is. Now I can drop the fans down in there and plug them in without any obstructions, hopefully. Nice big hole to work in. And I can go ahead and put that heat shield across this mount on the radiator from up here. That's nice. These 2 coarse threaded bolts mount on this stand. It looks backwards, but the skin of the extension is to protect the transmission lines, I guess. And I got the pan installed. Hopefully that shortcut doesn't interfere with getting these lines put under that cooling fan support. It's got a little ledge for it. If it does, then I'll adjust this accordingly, I guess. Just check your transmission line fittings for being tight, and a drain on the radiator too. This side has a coolant tank on it as well. And put the fan down in there, and the coolant tank slides into a slot and snaps down onto a pin. It's separate from the actual hold down 10mm. There's a part that holds helps hold the transmission lines off of the radiator hose, I guess. And that's kind of a back brace for that metal plate. I suppose there's another one on the radiator. I'm gonna plug this in. Yeah, it went. Just had to lift the transmission lines up on a slit down in there and keep the fan out of the cooling fins. The overflow's installed and snapped into its spot, locked in, fans bolted in. Upper radiator hose is installed with the R rode on the bottom radiator hose facing the radiator. Fans are plugged in. Transmission lines are tracking along the holders. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pressure test the cooling system. Just test this replacement radiator out. And then set the air conditioner and bracket down on there with the alternator. And the bolt that goes through the alternator. And I put a new ring on the high pressure line for the air conditioner. I washed the puke tank out. I washed the overflow tank out. Moving right along. Power steering pump's plugged in, O2 sensors, mass airflow sensor, hoses, tubes, brackets, drop the air in, fuel lines, PCV valve hose. It's holding now. And business. That's just air too, so it's really gonna. It's lucky the water pump's even holding that much. Even a good pump. That's fine though. I'd rather have it go instead of wasting that good antifreeze, or having it leaking out and running this motor after I just put it in. Good enough. I just putting accessories on it, fill it full antifreeze. I put the 3 bolts in the air conditioner mounting bracket. Put a little PAG oil on your O-ring. Pull your plugs. Make sure you got a new O-ring on it. And make sure it's clean down in there and there's no dirt getting drug into it and the faces are clean. And retighten it down. Now the system needs a vacuum pulled on it. And cap your oil off, it draws moisture pretty fast. Tighten that down. Charge the system when I get around to it. It's not high priority at the moment. Let's set the alternator down in there. I went ahead and laid the alternator in there. I greased this adjuster bolt up. It's pretty rusty. Bolt stuck in there with this lock. It's kind of tricky. It has to catch on the bottom and the top. This notch does. Make sure it settles down. Stuck this bolt. It's got no threads on it for about an inch. Then it's got threads through there. Good enough now. I went along that piece. There's one off the new motor, new replacement motor, wire holder. Air conditioner plug in. Looks like it's going to be holding one or the other. It really doesn't want to set on that piece. Maybe the bracket's bent. Okay, that looks pretty good. A little fastener there. And I'll plug the air conditioner in. Okay, it looks pretty good. Now let's slip the belts on there. Our steering pump and the other one's over there somewhere. And go ahead and put the fuel line on. Make sure the plastic ears open up. And stick the safety on there. And the return line. Make sure ain't no dirt in it. Well, I'll take a needle nose and open that clamp up a little bit. Maybe not. Oh. That's in It's a retainer, PCV valve. That'll probably work. Clamps are tight on that, bolts are tight, cables hooked up. Yeah. Battery acid on my fingers. Okay, let me slip the belts on here. First the air conditioner, then the alternator power steering pump combination. This deal here, I don't know. Just thread this pulley down till the belt's where you want it to be and tighten it down, then lock these nuts onto it. Put this power steering alternator belt in there and tighten the hinge bolt down. It really takes quite a bit of force to sink this bushing in on the back side. Pow! But just make sure it's tight or it'll waller out the holes, like it's starting to, looks like. And I'll tighten this bolt down moderately. Okay, I've put 4 quarts of oil in it. Fuel line's hooked up. Just need to put some antifreeze in it. Make sure your either pulley bolts tighten down for your air conditioner. Well, the antifreeze is installed without incident, no mess. Gotta love the airlift system. Now I'll hook the battery up, and before you hook the cables up, make sure the keys are in your hand or out of the ignition. You'll fry something. Go ahead and hook the negative up last. Tighten the cable down. The battery's hooked up. Looked everything over again. Make sure the belts aren't in anything, that there's oil and antifreeze in it. And it's time to try this used motor out. Valve tube's already got hot. EGR valve stuck on this one or something. Yep, it's hot alright. I have to look into that. This tube normally shouldn't be hot sitting idle. I don't know if I hear a little bit of an exhaust leak or where it's at. It might be a bad donut gasket. It's not my department. As long as it ain't leaking oil, antifreeze, transmission fluid, and not missing. And hopefully not setting any code. Gotta put the splash shield back on it and let it off the jack stand. Be in business. I got a fan carrying the exhaust outside. Check transmission lines, make sure they're not leaking. No puddle underneath of it. Things can go wrong real fast. This head's been repaired on this side, and make sure it's not leaking oil out of the valve cover. If they recycled the valve cover gasket when they repaired it. Transmission line is doing the same, the radiator's not leaking, drain's tight. Now the cover don't leak. I'm hearing leaks around the manifold gaskets. Oil pan drain plug's tight. Recheck the oil level in it after I get it off the jack stand. Okay, it must be on time, looks good, sounds good, good enough. I've seen something. Yeah, no, I don't know. Moisture in the exhaust, I guess. And that's how it's done right there. Now my preference is really for all them fine threaded bolts would be to put never sees on them. That goes into the block anyway, because after a while they become a permanent resident. I still got to pull vacuum on the AC and charge it. That looks good, sounds good, not leaking. I'm going to see what the EGR valve's problem is.